The night shift was always the hardest part of Maya's job. During the day, the hospital felt alive, nurses rushing between rooms, phones ringing, doctors barking orders, and patients talking with their families. But once the clock struck midnight, everything changed. The halls emptied, the lights dimmed, and the whole place seemed to breathe differently, as if the building itself came awake when everyone else went to sleep. Maya had grown used to the silence. She had grown used to the flickering fluorescent bulbs that never seemed to stay fixed for long. She had even grown used to the feeling of being watched, the way her skin prickled when she walked down certain corridors. The night shift taught you not to think too much. If you let your mind wander, the shadows would play tricks on you, and the noises would drive you mad. But on that particular night, something felt different. It began with a sound, a faint whisper. She was walking past the east wing, where most of the rooms were empty, when she heard it. At first, it was so soft she thought it might have been the air vents. But then she froze. The whisper wasn't random noise. It was her name, Maya. She spun around, scanning the corridor. The lights above buzzed faintly, one of them flickering. There was no one. The hall stretched in both directions, silent and sterile. Her heartbeat quickened, and she pressed her hand to her chest, forcing herself to take a breath. "Don't be stupid," she muttered under her breath. Just the night playing tricks. Still, she couldn't shake the unease. As she reached the nurse's station, the call bell suddenly went off. She glanced at the panel and her stomach dropped. Room 12. Her throat went dry. That room had been locked for years. No patients were ever placed there, not since the incident. The story floated around the staff like an unspoken curse. A middle-aged man had died there in the middle of the night, and the details of his death had been kept deliberately vague. Some said he had suffered a heart attack. Others whispered that he had killed himself in the bed. But no matter the truth, everyone agreed on one thing: the room was wrong. The few times maintenance had been sent in to clean or fix something, they complained of freezing temperatures, flickering lights, and doors that refused to stay open. Eventually, the administration stopped assigning patients there altogether. They simply locked it and left it alone. So why was the call bell ringing? Maya's hands trembled as she picked up the master key. She tried to calm herself with logic. It must be faulty wiring. The building is old, after all. These systems break all the time. But another voice in her head whispered, "What if it isn't?" The hallway leading to room 12 felt longer than usual, each step echoing against the cold tiles. Her shoes squeaked faintly, and she wished they wouldn't. It made the silence between each step feel heavier. The closer she got, the colder the air became, a chill seeping into her skin until her arms were covered in goosebumps. Finally, she reached the door. It looked like every other hospital door, off-white, with a small window covered by blinds. But to Maya, it seemed darker, heavier, like it was swallowing the light around it. Her fingers shook as she slid the key into the lock. The moment the door creaked open, a rush of icy air spilled into the hallway. She stepped inside. The room was spotless. Too spotless. The bed was perfectly made, the sheets tight and crisp, as if waiting for someone. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, but underneath it was something else. Something sour, something old. Her eyes moved to the call button on the wall. It wasn't lit anymore. She took a cautious step forward, her breath visible in the freezing air. "Hello," she whispered, though she instantly regretted it. Her voice felt too loud, too invasive. No response, just silence. Her gaze drifted to the bed. That was when she saw it. On the pillow, written in the fine layer of dust that shouldn't have been there in such a spotless room, were two words. "Still here." Maya's legs locked in place. She couldn't breathe. The words were etched as though someone had pressed a finger into the dust, letter by letter, deliberately slow. Her mind raced. Who wrote this? When? How? But the real horror hit her when she realized there was no dust anywhere else in the room. The surfaces were clean, shining. Only the pillow carried it. Only the pillow, as though something had settled there, night after night, long after the room had been abandoned. Her hands shook as she backed away toward the door. She wanted to scream, to call for someone, but her throat refused to work. The lights above her flickered violently, the buzzing growing louder, like a swarm of insects. And then, faintly, from the corner of the room, she heard it again. Maya. This time, the voice was closer. Her survival instinct finally kicked in. She bolted from the room, slamming the door shut behind her, the lock clicking back into place. She didn't stop running until she reached the nurse's station, panting, clutching the desk for support. She glanced at the panel. Room 12's light was still off. But deep down, she knew. The room wasn't empty. It had never been empty. And whatever was in there, knew her name. Ethan had worked the night shift at the gas station for almost a year. Most nights were boring, long hours spent behind the counter, listening to the hum of the refrigerators and the occasional buzz of the neon, open 24 hours, sign outside. The monotony was only broken by the few stragglers who came in for cigarettes, coffee, or to use the bathroom. But the dead hours between 2 and 4 a.m. were the worst. The roads grew quiet, the lights outside seemed dimmer, and the shadows stretched longer than they should have. Ethan always felt as though the world forgot this lonely patch of highway at that time, as if the rest of reality had gone to sleep, leaving him stranded in some half-abandoned place. It was exactly 3:07 a.m. when the bell above the door chimed. Ethan looked up from the crossword puzzle he was working on. A man had entered. He was tall, gaunt, his frame swallowed in a tattered grey coat that hung past his knees. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, and his hair plastered to his forehead as though he had just come in from the rain. Except it wasn't raining. It hadn't rained for days. The man walked slowly, not acknowledging Ethan, not even glancing toward the counter. His boots left faint wet marks on the tiled floor. Ethan frowned. Strange. I didn't hear a car pull up. Didn't even hear footsteps before the bell. The man moved to the coffee station at the far corner of the store. He stood there, staring at the glass pot, but made no move to pour himself a cup. He just stood, his reflection faintly visible in the dark surface. Can I help you, sir? Ethan called out, his voice uneasy. The man didn't respond. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, keeping his eyes on the stranger. Something about the silence pressed down on him. Usually, people muttered or moved around, but this man was completely still. His posture was stiff, unnatural, like he didn't belong in his own body. Minutes ticked by. Ethan cleared his throat, louder this time. Sir, are you planning on buying something? The man didn't move, but then, as though reacting to the words, he tilted his head ever so slightly. Not toward Ethan, toward his own reflection in the glass. Ethan felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. Something wasn't right. He glanced at the security monitor above the counter, checking the feed from the camera aimed at the coffee station. His blood ran cold. The man wasn't there. The feed showed only the coffee machine. No figure standing before it. No wet marks on the floor. Nothing. Ethan's throat went dry. He looked back at the corner. The man was still there, his back turned, shoulders rigid, staring. This doesn't make sense. The store felt smaller now, the air heavy, the buzzing of the refrigerators louder, almost unbearable. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. Look, he said, trying to sound braver than he felt, if you're just messing around, you need to leave. Now. Finally, the man moved. He didn't turn, didn't walk away. Instead, his arm lifted slowly, unnaturally, like it weighed too much. His pale, bony finger pointed, not at the coffee machine, not at the counter. At Ethan. Ethan's chest tightened. He stumbled back a step, knocking over a pack of gum. His trembling hand reached for the phone under the counter, but before he could dial, the store's door chime rang again. Ethan jerked his head toward the entrance. Nobody was there. The glass doors stood closed. When he turned back to the coffee station, the man was gone. The space was empty. The only evidence of his presence was the faint puddle of water glistening on the floor where he had stood. Ethan stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, his breath shallow, his body refusing to move. Finally, with shaking hands, he grabbed the mop from the storage closet and approached the puddle. His reflection wavered in the water. For a brief moment, he swore he saw another face staring back, pale, hollow-eyed, with lips slightly parted. He blinked hard, and the image was gone. He didn't sleep the next day. He couldn't. The following night, he told himself it had been exhaustion, maybe even a hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and too little rest. He almost convinced himself, until the police showed up. 2 officers walked in around 2:30 a.m., asking about surveillance footage. They were looking for a man in a grey coat who matched the exact description of the figure Ethan had seen. He drowned in the river up north, one of the officers explained, shaking his head. Couple weeks ago. Witnesses claim they've been seeing him around here. Probably just stories, but we're checking it out. Ethan forced a weak laugh. You're saying, a ghost? The officer shrugged. People see what they want to see. When they left, Ethan's stomach churned. He waited until the end of his shift before daring to review the security footage again. There it was, the feed from last night. 3:07 a.m. The bell above the door chimed. The glass door opened slightly. No one entered. At the same moment, the camera aimed at the coffee machine showed something impossible, the pot filling itself, steaming as though someone invisible was pouring. Drops of water dripped onto the floor, pooling exactly where Ethan had seen the man. Ethan's skin crawled as he watched the final seconds of the footage. Because in the reflection of the glass coffee pot, faint, distorted, but unmistakable, was a pale face. Hollow eyes, lips barely moving, mouth shaping one word, Ethan. He slammed the monitor off, his chest heaving. The bell above the door chimed behind him. And this time, he didn't want to turn around. Leah never liked working the night shift at the mall. It wasn't fear, not exactly. She was tough, used to long hours and eerie silences. But there was something unnatural about the way the mall felt after midnight. During the day, it was full of chatter, laughter, and endless footsteps echoing across the tiled floors. Kids running, couples strolling, food court noises blending into a constant hum of life. At night, though, all of that vanished. The stores were locked, the lights dimmed to half power, and the wide hallways stretched into yawning tunnels of darkness. Leah was the only guard assigned to patrol the main floor that night. She'd done it dozens of times before, walk the perimeter, check the exits, make sure no one had broken in. Simple work, but the silence always pressed down on her, so much that she often found herself talking aloud just to hear her own voice. That night started like any other. She sipped bitter coffee from her thermos, scrolling idly through her phone before her first patrol. At 1:13 a.m., her radio hissed with static. She frowned, lifting it from her belt. Control, come again. Nothing, just more static, followed by silence. She tapped it a few times, shrugged, and clipped it back. 5 minutes later, as she rounded the west corridor, she froze. A sound carried faintly through the halls. A child's laughter. Her first thought was kids. Sometimes teenagers broke in through the service doors to mess around. But this sound, this was younger. Playful. The unmistakable giggle of a small child. Leah's grip tightened on her flashlight. Hello, she called out, her voice echoing. The laughter stopped. Her stomach knotted. She turned toward the play area near the food court, the one with the plastic slides and coin-operated rides. Slowly, she made her way there, her boots echoing against the tiles. The play area looked normal at first glance. Small chairs stacked neatly, toys pushed into bins, the little carousel standing still in the corner. She swept her flashlight across the room, then froze. Every toy with eyes, stuffed animals, dolls, even the cartoon characters painted on the playmats, was staring at her. She blinked hard, shaking her head. That didn't make sense. But no, when her light traced over them again, it was unmistakable. All of them seemed angled directly toward her, their painted or glass eyes catching the light in a faint glow. Her breath quickened. "This isn't funny," she muttered. A soft pat 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 of footsteps echoed behind her. Small footsteps. Leah spun, her flashlight beam slicing through the corridor. Empty. Just rows of shuttered storefronts and shadows. She swallowed hard, backing toward the security desk. But as she moved, she glanced into the display windows she passed. Her reflection looked back at her in each one, flashlight in hand, uniform neat. Normal, until she reached the toy store. The glass there showed something different. Her reflection was there, but not alone. A child stood beside her. A boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. His face was pale, almost gray, with hollow eyes that seemed too dark for his face. His lips were curled into a faint, unnatural smile. Leah's heart lurched. She spun around. No one. When she looked back at the glass, the boy was gone. Her legs shook as she stumbled back toward the security office. She told herself it was exhaustion, just her imagination. But deep down, she knew better. The mall wasn't empty. Something was here with her. Back at her desk, she tried to calm her nerves by reviewing the security cameras. Her fingers hovered over the controls, reluctant but desperate. Camera 7, food court. Normal. Camera 12, play area. Her blood ran cold. In the middle of the empty playroom sat a boy. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, his head bowed, his hands resting in his lap. The grainy footage made his face unclear, but she recognized the pale shape. Leah leaned closer, heart pounding. The boy slowly lifted his head toward the camera, and smiled. Her radio hissed again. This time, it wasn't static. A voice, soft, childlike, whispered, "Come play with me." The words echoed from the radio speaker, though she hadn't pressed the button. Her hand shook as she dropped the device onto the desk. The monitor flickered, and the boy was suddenly gone from the playroom feed. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stand. She couldn't just sit there. She had to prove it to herself, prove that the room was empty. Gripping her flashlight like a weapon, she made her way back toward the play area. The silence was heavier now, pressing into her ears. Each step seemed to echo twice, as though someone was following just a beat behind her. She reached the room. It was empty. No boy. Her flashlight beam darted around desperately, searching every corner. Then she noticed something. On the wall near the small slide, scrawled in something dark, maybe marker, maybe something else, were 3 words. "Play with me." Her chest tightened. She backed away slowly. Then the toys began to move. The plastic ride-on cars rocked gently, their wheels squeaking. The carousel groaned as it turned half a rotation. A stuffed bear toppled from its seat as though nudged by invisible hands. Leah's breath caught in her throat. Then came the footsteps again. Quick, light, circling her. She swung her flashlight wildly, catching nothing but flashes of color and shadow. A laugh rang out, louder this time, bouncing off the walls. Her flashlight flickered, then went out completely. Panic surged. She fumbled for the switch, shaking it violently. When the beam snapped back on, her stomach dropped. Standing in the middle of the room was the boy. He was closer than she expected, his eyes hollow pits, his smile stretched too wide. His pale hand reached toward her, fingers twitching. Leah stumbled backward, nearly falling. She bolted from the room, sprinting down the hall without looking back. When she finally reached the office, she slammed the door shut and locked it, her chest heaving, sweat dripping down her temples. The radio hissed again, faint laughter spilling from the speaker. She stared at the monitor with trembling hands. On every single camera feed, every corridor, every store window, every hallway, the boy was there. Dozens of him, each one staring at her through the lens. And all of them smiling.